So my name is Vincent Martin, as you probably know already. I'm the Director of the Office of Innovation, and I'm truly pleased to welcome you to this session, which is called Sowing the Future, Gene Editing for Agri-Food Systems. For me, as someone who has worked at FAO for more than 2 decades, I've had the privilege of seeing how science and technology has evolved and influenced agri-food systems. So today's session is an exciting opportunity to continue that exploration. And as you all know, and we could agree on, gene editing holds significant potential for transformation. It can change how we grow food and improve nutrition. It can also build resilience against climate change. However, gene editing is just one tool among many. It's not a standalone solution. The effective use of gene editing requires the right policies and infrastructure. Inclusive governance frameworks are also essential for its success. So we need to ensure responsible use and equitable benefits. So this is a chance for us to learn together, to reflect and to think about the many possibilities ahead. What we discuss today may have far-reaching implications. It's not just in the field of research, but for the people who depend on this innovation in their daily lives. So now it's my honor to introduce our FAO Director General, Mr. Chu Dongyu, who will share his opening remarks and provide more insights into the significance of today's discussion. Director General, please join me on the stage, and please welcome the Director General.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, it's a great honor for me to welcome you, and especially this session. I think thanks to my colleagues, Martin Vincent, together with Craft by Sea, and to organize this session, Sowing the Future, why we focus on gene editing. The soil in the future is the agronomic terminology. Yesterday I had a pleasant discussion with the chief scientist from the UK, Food Safety Agency. We always transform ourselves from the classic to the fashionable topic. That's what we need, FAO. Not only sowing the seeds, sowing the future. We should start with modified gene. Gene editing technology is not so long ago. I remember about 20 years ago, my PhD student, they wanted to focus on this fashionable topic. I encouraged them to do so. Luckily, they become the first group of scientists in gene editing technology in China. So when I come here, I asked my senior staff, even nobody can tell me what is gene editing. Until 2 years ago, or 1 year ago, the gene editing technology became the Nobel variety. And then people started fushing. I said, you are too late. You are out of fushing after 20 years more. So technology is going fast. I encourage all of you here, no matter you're from scientific community, from the government, from private sector, from the farmers organization. I saw the Secretary General from all the farmers organizations this morning. Yeah. We have to follow the wave. And then now suddenly everyone talk about the AI. As the FAO, since I come, I create a lot of AI. Because AI in short is chief scientist AI, director AI. And there's so many AI. And only they have become fashionable because last year they focused on the summit, the future summit, and everyone talk about AI. But FAO, again, 5 years ago when I arrived, first the UN agency, only one, had the Roman call for AI. artificial intelligent AI, Roma call for AI ethics, together with the Holy Father and IBM, Microsoft, and the Italian Minister of the Innovation together. That was December 2019. We had an official launch on February 28. Why I remember that? After that, there is one colleague from the EU. He got an infection with COVID. Unfortunately, he died. He was a former president of the parliament from Italy. We, as a former biologist, I was a little afraid also. My drivers, my participants included chief economist, and also Henry, I think. He's now in the office of the innovation. We are 11 people. Unfortunately and fortunately, become first group of the staff to be tested with the COVID virus. That was 5th of the March, and locked us at home for 2 weeks. And at first, I got a direct call from the Secretary General and Deputy Secretary General. Are you okay? And why I said that? We are not a scientist. FAO staff and all the people of the service, even scientists, if they are fashionable scientists, you have to follow the front line of research. But once something comes to FAO, come to the country and ordinary people, it should be. That's why yesterday said we should do it available. So gene editing is available for more than 20 years. And now they accessible for different crops, different animals and plants, even the microorganism. And the chief scientist, he's doing focus on the microorganism. And also affordable. And more important now, because I'm FAO Director General, we should have more beneficial to all. First, to the small food producers, including farmers, family farmers, and other food producers. That's any kind of technology should be beneficial to all. Not only technology, new technology especially, not only for papers. We started with the paper, ended up with the food or new products like AI you talk about, and iPad, mobile phone, you name it. So all the technology should be started with paper, scientific paper, and they end up with the new products, include the new food. So now the people talk about some artificial meat. Don't follow that fashionable term. Artificial meat is not new. It's vegetative processed meat looks like a tofu. Yeah. Many years ago when China was so poor, when I was a student in the university 45 years ago, we had the called man-made meat. When I tested, it's actually the residue from soybean. The people rich, they eat the bean curd. We are poor students, tested the so-called artificial meat from the soybean residues. Because it looks like a lean pork, but there are no tests at all. Yeah, but if you visit the monkey in China, about 5,000 years ago, they debunked the artificial meat from the vegetative sources. Still now, if you visit Hangzhou, I'm not promoting Hangzhou, but they are famous temple. They can offer you all the flavors, including fish flavor, meat flavor, chicken flavor, duck flavor, you name it. But they are all made from the soybean or other plant resource. So I know a lot of scientists create artificial meat, and then they scare the consumers. Oh, something new. But you didn't give the science population education. We need a popular science education. That's the role of this forum also. Because FAO is the bridge between scientists and consumers, between scientists and producers, between scientists and policymakers. Because yesterday, I hear many times from my chief scientist intern and also the director of the innovation, talk about the inclusive. But not too much limited to inclusive what you said. It's too narrow. We should open, accessible to all the key players and the related partners. That's the Sowing the Future. We started with gene editing. Gene editing is a new way to produce new high-quality seeds. So let's sow seeds and start a gene modified by gene editing technology, and also of the solutions for farmers and producers and for the consumers. And that's the role of FAO. That is one of the purpose of the World Food Forum and its open debate platform, especially on science innovation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director General, for your insights and for pushing us to think outside of the box. And also beyond inclusivity, we need to have these kind of holistic approaches. Okay, so now just 1 second to show you this. This is a journey we will have during the Science and Innovation Forum. That's our journey. And so yesterday we were setting the scene, and this morning we are starting this deep dive into these 3 themes: biotechnology, digital agriculture, and community-driven innovations. And then we look at the barriers to adoption a little bit later. And then how can we empower and listen to the people and learn from their innovations? And finally, tomorrow we will discuss how do we bring impact at scale? How do we scale up innovations? So that's the journey where we are, and we are at the number 2. And having said that, now I would like to invite my colleague and friend, Dr. Corinna Hawkes. She's the director of the Food Systems and Food Safety Division, and she will be moderating this fantastic panel. Thank you, Corinna, for joining us.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you very much to the Director General for your inspiring remarks as ever. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it's wonderful to see you here today, and I'm delighted to be your moderator today. So without any further ado, I would like to invite the first panelists onto the stage. If you can come up, please. I would like to welcome Ines Slamet-Ludin, Ihuoma Akwono, and Ying Xiao. Please do come up on stage. I have to say, I'm not sure, Director General, if we'd noticed.
Woman? No.
Well, I think we're proud to be women, but we didn't. I don't think we noticed.
I'm a man.
You, Director
I'm
General.
still a man.
Please take a seat. And we had not noticed this before, so.
We put all the men, you will start complaining.
It's true. It's true.
That's the perception. Yeah?
But I know that you are a great supporter of women.
Of course. That's why I said that.
And thank you for that, Director General. So Ines, you are the lead of the Gene Editing Initiative and head of the Rice Genetic Design and Validation Unit at the International Rice Research Institute, as is stated there. Ihuoma, you are plant biotechnologist at the National Root Crops Research Institute in Nigeria. And Ying, you are co-founder and CEO of Plantic Biosciences in Paris, France. Now, thank you for coming onto the stage. But we are actually going to start, before we start the panel, with a Mentimeter. So let's go to that. We want to have a sense of the knowledge in the room of what is your understanding of gene editing in agriculture. So we have some options there. There's a Mentimeter use code at the top there. So if you could bring out your phones, and so you can answer that question for us. What is your understanding of gene editing in agriculture? I know, Director General, what you will say. You have a lot of experience, but let's see what the others have to say.
That's a popular science education.
I'm wondering whether I'm colorblind here because they're very similar colors of blue. But I think the 26, yeah, there it is. I have a basic understanding but would like to know. Oh, that's great. Talking about science education means that almost half the people who have answered have a basic understanding but would like to know more. And then a very small number not at all familiar, and the rest evenly divided. I've heard of it but don't know much about it. I'm familiar with it and understand how it works. Excellent. I think we can close that now. So that gives you a sense now of who is in the room, and it also gives the panelists a sense that almost half the room would like to know more. So we can do that in our panel now, and our second panel, we will be having two panels, and also there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions of each panel, which can help that understanding. So I would like to now move ahead with the questions that we have set for each of the panelists. And I wanted to stress the importance of the remarks made about equality of access, inclusivity, and how we can be sure that these technologies, gene editing, is delivering delivering on its promise. So I wanted to start by asking Inez, how can we ensure that gene editing addresses the needs of vulnerable groups, particularly in the face of climate change, something we all know is incredibly important? And what are the specific steps that the CGIAR is taking in this regard? Over to you.
Thank you for inviting me to this important forum. I'm currently assigned to lead CGIAR Gene Editing Initiative. So in the current daunting situation where demand for food is high, at the same time climate change dynamic, political instability, and productivity threats adversely impact food, nutrition, and livelihood security, CGIAR looks to all plausible solutions to increase yield gain and close the production gap sustainably. So, genome editing is a valuable breeding tool that can potentially help countries meet their sustainable goal. This technology allows direct editing in local varieties and advanced breeding lines in seed-propagated crops, eliminating repeated backcrossing to avoid linkage drag, and therefore reducing the time to develop new varieties. Genome editing also opened the possibility for further use DNA sequence knowledge from traditional varieties and gene bank collection that have climate-resilient traits for mutual benefit sharings. The CGIAR Genome Editing Initiative works with countries who wish to access this technology with two objectives, basically. The first one is to co-develop climate-resilient and healthier gene editing crops with working together with National Agriculture Research System, advanced research institutes, private entities, including small and medium-sized enterprises. And the second is to support effective management of the technology by addressing a variety of innovation factors, such as regulatory policy, equitable technology access, stakeholder engagement, stewardship. Both objectives will be supported by mutual capacity sharing and skill development to support the delivery of genetic solution. So basically, the theme of this that no one is left behind. But the effort will be undertaken in a coordinated breeding approach that specifically consider advantage of women and youth and improve sustainability. To ensure the genome editing meet the needs of marginal farmer, the effort started with multi-stakeholder consultation, which really rigorously prioritized crop trait combination. And the editing target is selected from the targeted product profile in the respective region. So breeders has developed through participatory process with the national breeders, farmer groups, and value chain actors, a targeted product profile. So we pick up select the traits from there, and it must be accessible, affordable, and safe. And the CGIAR has a comparative advantage because 50 years extensive history of breeding research and global adoption on the varieties important for low middle income countries is a hallmark of CGIAR in history in agriculture research. So we already have historical relationship established with national partners, advanced research institute, value chain actors, regulators, and private sectors. So with bilateral funding, through extensive collaboration with a consortium of scientists, CGIAR has embarked development of genome editing projects, such as thermotolerance in cassava, reduction in aflatoxin in groundnuts, maize lethal necrosis, delayed rancidity in pearl millet, bacterial leaf blight resistant in rice, fungal disease in rice, disease resistant in cassava and banana, and reducing cyanide in cassava, arsenic in rice, which will provide higher economic benefit for producers and consumers. And as a non-profit organization, CGIAR also works closely with partners to improve orphan crops, such as developing disease-resistant yam. These products were developed either through single gene knockout, multiplex editing, or prime editing. So genome editing has also the potential for not only adaptation, but mitigation of the climate change. So we also work on the, reducing the fertilizer use and also aim to reduce the release of methane and nitrous oxides. And genome editing can contribute to climate change mitigation even further if we can channel climate funding to rural communities and smallholder for rice farmers or other crop farmers through genetic improvement and relevant agronomic practice. At the same time, in our recent publication in PNS, we also work on the try to making crops healthier. We managed to reduce glycemic index in rice, and which is important, essential for diabetic population. Low GI rice will have higher economic value for smallholder farmers who produce it. But in summary, there are 7 important aspects to enhance potential use of this technology and product adoption. First is the co-development of innovative products to ensure local relevancy. Second is a mutual capacity development, working with Global South scientists, regulator, and private entities. Third is infrastructure access, for example, developing hubs in the regions or developing local infrastructure. Fourth is the strong network of community of practice that supports product development and technology access. And the fifth is the product safety, quality control, and stewardship. Six is locally led outreach that respect the local context and issues. And 7 is affordability, which largely depends on the cost of regulatory process and accessibility of this technology, and also quality seeds. I think with that, I want to
Thank you very much. You made a strong case for gene editing and listed multiple benefits, not least climate resilience and health. And also what struck me was this combination of tradition and innovation with going back to orphan crops, but also traditional varieties, and then innovating them into the future, and this importance of bringing all of the stakeholders together. So thanks for that very comprehensive response. Now, Ihuoma, Inez mentioned cassava, clearly a very important crop. How can gene editing improve the nutritional quality and yield of cassava? And what impact can that actually have on people's food security?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really delighted to be here. Okay, so in responding to your question, for us in Nigeria, cassava is a staple crop for over 800 million people. And it's also an effective food security crop due to its resilience to climate change. And then also it has the ability to grow on marginal soil with minimal input. But then this production and utilization is constrained by two major factors that I would like to talk about today. First is the poor nutritional content, because the edible root of cassava, which is mainly consumed, is poor in protein and essential vitamins and minerals like iron and zinc. And then secondly, the crop is greatly impacted with bacterial and viral diseases. So that leaves us with the option of developing technologies that can really help us preserve this crop, which is important to us. So what we are doing with genome editing is to identify candidate genes in cassava that we could target for either upregulation or downregulation of these genes to achieve a desired trait. For instance, I will give you an example, like protein and other essential nutrients that are not in cassava. What can we do with genome editing to improve it? So what we target to do is to use the vast resources of bioinformatic resources, like we have the genomics, data on the genome of cassava, we have transcriptomic data, we have data on the protein, and we have also data on the metabolomic components of the crop. So using this data, we can actually understand and then modify biosynthetic pathways in the crop that for essential metabolites that are responsible for the production of, for example, protein and production of accumulation of iron and zinc in the crop. So that's our target, what we're doing, using genome editing to understand these processes and then be able to modify the crop so that it can enhance its nutritional content as well as other important traits. Then, secondly, more importantly, is the adverse impact that the viral and bacterial diseases have on the crop. I want to talk particularly about one important disease, which is called cassava bacterial blight disease. Now, the problem with this disease is that it is very sporadic in nature and devastating. And very little has been done to minimize its impact because the scientific world have not really understood how it's going to come, how and when it's going to come. So you can have a good field for this year, and next year you have a field that is greatly impacted by cassava bacterial blight. And what happens is that when this happens, you can lose you lose yield of the crop. You can lose an entire cassava field to the bacteria. And then also, the most importantly, it affects the availability of quality planting materials for the subsequent cultivation. So what we're doing is to use genome editing to target a susceptibility gene in cassava, which is known as ME-sweet10A gene, which is a sweet gene that has been proven to aid in the establishment and progression of the disease in cassava. So what happens is that the bacteria that causes this disease attaches to the cell of the plant and releases protein substances to these cells and make them to begin to cause an overexpression of this susceptibility gene, which is called the sweet gene. So what happens is that the bacteria establishes and begin to produce the disease. So what we are doing using genome editing is to go into the cassava genome, target the sweet gene, and use one of the tools of genome editing, like CRISPR-Cas9, to a kind of cause edit, modify this gene, so that when the bacteria comes, it no longer recognizes the gene, and then our cassava is preserved. So the National Root Crop Research Institute, in collaboration with the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center, are developing these sweet gene-edited cassava lines. And these lines, both in what we call the model cultivars and cultivars that the farmers love to plant. So we are developing these cassava cultivars and to test them under growing conditions in Nigeria to see that they have resistance to cassava bacterial blight. What is the impact to food security? Now, if we're able to achieve that, what that means is that we are able to limit the progression of this sporadic devastating disease. That is number one. And then number two, we could increase the yield of the crop. And then number three, which is very important, to ensure the continuity of quality planting materials that can be used in subsequent cultivation. So that is what we're currently doing, and we hope to use this technology to also target other crops of interest to the Institute. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Absolutely fascinating. Thanks so much for explaining the process that you follow so clearly. And your focus there on the improving nutrition, improving yield, and of course enhancing the disease resistance. I found that quite fascinating. Thank you very much for that. Now, Ying, moving on to focus a bit more on the climate resilience aspects here. How can gene editing, in your view, be leveraged to develop more resilient crops and enhance the resilience of agri-food systems as a whole? Over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be invited to the forum and to address this question about the potential of genome editing technologies and the creation of more resilient crops and more resilient agri-food systems. So first of all, how do we define agricultural resilience? Agricultural resilience can be defined as the ability of agri-food systems to withstand and rapidly recover from external shocks. Natural hazards, including extreme weather events brought by climate change, represent a group of significant shocks that threaten agricultural resilience. These events, in particular heat waves, droughts, and extreme rainstorms, cause substantial crop losses. The forecasts for these extreme weather events are particularly alarming for certain regions of the world, such as South and Southeast Asia, where record-breaking heat waves in recent years were made 30 times more likely as a result of climate change. India is a striking example, having endured consecutive record-breaking heat waves in the last 3 years, with temperatures soaring up to 50 degrees Celsius across various regions in 2024. As a result, the production and yield of tomato crops, of which India is the second largest global producer, can be reduced by up to 75% due to such heat stress. These impacts highlight the urgent need for developing more climate-resilient crops that can adapt and thrive under challenging weather conditions to ensure global food security and the livelihoods of millions of farmers, especially the food-insecure people, over 75% of whom derive their livelihoods from agriculture. Now, how can genome editing technologies be leveraged to develop more climate-resilient crops? As addressed by the previous speakers, genome editing presents a transformative opportunity for creating improved plant varieties rapidly, saving a tremendous amount of time and cost. What is particularly promising is its potential to enhance complex, underexplored traits due to previous technical limitations. Heat tolerance is an example of such complex traits, which involves multiple stress response mechanisms and can vary significantly from plant to plant and from one plant species to another. Recent technical developments in genome editing technologies, especially the CRISPR-Cas systems, made repeated experiments more accessible. In addition, other disruptive technologies can be leveraged to enable the power of genome editing further in order to engineer these complex and important traits. At Plantic, we utilize and develop 3 key technologies in particular to address the major bottlenecks in applying genome editing in plant breeding. The first 2 key technologies are machine learning and cloud computing, and they work hand in hand. Developing tools using these technologies means that instead of random or broad experimentation, we can analyze, compare, and predict the most relevant targets in the genome for generating a specific trait. It also means that we are able to, for the very first time, engineer the underexplored regions in the genome, or the dark genome, to develop complex traits effectively and without unwanted side effects. The third technology is new plant transformation methods to deliver DNA into various plant cells or tissues using a combination of nanoparticles and microfluidics. These technologies combined offer an exciting opportunity to scale the genome editing operations to different plant varieties and species quickly and in a cost-effective way. This is particularly promising for enhancing adapted traits in neglected and underutilized crop species, and especially in marginalized geographies. In addition, the genome editing systems offer the opportunity to combine multiple targets in one single editing event, enabling the prospect of rapid and significant improvements in these species. Now, how does this technological advantage translate into real-world results? By modifying small and precise targets in the underexplored dark genome, at Plantic we developed heat-resistant tomatoes that could transform lives. These tomatoes are estimated to save up to 40% of yield loss under representative simulated heat waves. To put this into perspective, at current production levels in India, the world's second largest tomato producer, our heat-resistant tomatoes could save about 8 million metric tons of tomato yield. 8 million metric tons, that is the equivalent of the total annual production and therefore the entire livelihoods for around 300,000 small and marginal farmers. What is even more important is that we've achieved these proofs of concept in less than 24 months compared to conventional methods that could take as many as 8 years. So as a small-sized innovator in the space, what can we do to help ensure the inclusivity of these innovations for small-scale producers? We believe that startups and SME players in the field are uniquely positioned to democratize genome editing technologies thanks to our agility and especially by extending the use of these technologies on niche crops and addressing developing markets. At Plantic, we are able to adapt our work in tomatoes to emerging high-potential food crops such as quinoa. Geographically, we're focusing on regions most affected by climate change, such as South and Southeast Asia, where farmers have fewer resources to adapt to extreme weather conditions themselves. As a smaller player, we cannot realize our mission and contribute to more resilient agri-food systems without the help of other stakeholders, such as policymakers, public funders, and private investors. Platforms like the World Food Forum is crucial to facilitate conversation and exchange between the stakeholders and make sure valuable innovations are supported and valorized. On that note, I will end my talk today. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much for giving us further insights into the disruptive technologies and the kind of startup innovation that's needed in the startup world in order to bring these benefits and to highlight for highlighting further benefits. So you've heard 3 passionate scientists here talk through some of the benefits of gene editing. In the next panel, we'll be looking at issues more of access, how this is experienced by farmers, what it means for regulation. But we would like to have some questions focus on the science aspects here. If there are questions and answers, we'd love to hear them. We have around 15 minutes. If you could just raise your hands if you have a question. Okay, I see a question here, but I'm going to go first to the back, please, and then I'll come to you. Please introduce yourself before your question, and please ask a question and be brief. We have some wonderful experts on the stage, so let's make use of their amazing brains in your questions, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue McCluskey, the Special Representative for Australian Agriculture. Thank you for your presentations. I think you've really demonstrated the absolute wonderful opportunity for transformation to absolutely leapfrog by the use of gene editing. Can you tell me how you're able to demonstrate the way that the evidence and science that underpins gene editing can really be a way that should be accepted by many countries around the world, and how do you see the risks perhaps with things like GMO as being a taint in terms to the take-up of these great innovations?
I think that's a great question. I'll go to you next, please.
Yeah, my question is for Ines. What is the latest progress?
Sorry, if you wouldn't mind giving your name and
Yeah, François Stepman from the Global Forum of Agriculture, Innovation and Research, GFAIR. So my question for Ines is, what is the latest development of the Gates-funded 101 African orphan crops, gene editing of 101 African orphan crops? It has been going on for the last 4 years and is embedded with ICRAF Nairobi.
Thanks for that specific question for Ines. We've also got the possibility of asking questions online, but I don't think there's any at this point in time yet. So could I ask you to address Sue's question first with some responses to Sue's question? Please, yes.
All right. You asked about the regulation, right, of genome editing products, right? Okay, so the regulatory tools have been put in place for the evaluation of gene-edited products. So unlike the GMOs, depending on the products intended to produce, if you're introducing any foreign gene using genome editing, it is going to be regulated as a GM crop. But if you're just modifying an existing gene in an organism, it is not going to be regulated as a genetically modified organism. So we have those machineries in place. So it depends on the products that you're going to make out of the gene editing technology. But mostly, if there is no introduction of any foreign gene, it is not going to be regulated. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that very clear explanation. Ines, could I ask you to respond to the question about the particular initiative here, and then add anything onto the initial question too?
Okay. Thank you for the question, but you're asking about the BMGF project on the editing of orphan crops? Actually, I am not 100% sure that the CGI are involved in the project, but it could be IITA involved.
No, it's called African Orphan Crops Consortium on Crop Genomes Training in Africa. It is embedded with ICRAF in Nairobi.
Yeah, I think.
So actually, IITA is involved in training of scientists to use genome editing to improve orphan crops. So they've done about, I think they're about in the 3rd tier of training, and such training is still continuing. So it's going on, and Kenya is the hub for the training. They just graduated some students, I think last week, from the 3rd tier.
To add on it, I think one of the, I mentioned before that IITA work on YAM also, but one of course, the challenge of the genome editing of the clonally propagated plants is to to ensure there is no transgene afterwards. So one of the current initiatives that we are working now is to develop techniques for transgene-free genome edited plant for clonally propagated plants, and it's ongoing. And actually next week I'm going to Kenya with IITA to also do the training on for the local scientists and regulators in Africa. Thank you. So it is an ongoing project. It is not easy. It's probably easier for the seed propagated plants because we can segregate out in the next generation. But for clonally propagated one, there has been some techniques. And we also work on the access with the private entities to get the friendly licensing for that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Looking around for further questions, but I'd like to ask you, Ying. You talked about, with clear commitment, to how the gene editing can help address food security, how it can promote climate resilience. How will you measure that? I mean, if you have a startup ecosystem, how will you measure the difference it's actually making on people's lives?
This is a key question. Thank you very much for that. And actually, we spend quite some energy thinking about this question in our daily company lives. One way that we are trying to measure it is, of course, to compare the results of the plants that we edited. For example, the heat-tolerant tomatoes I mentioned in my talk, to, let's say, the ones that are not edited and are used in the market. So one way to measure it is to compare the yield. It's the most direct way to see the impact. And how we see it is the loss of the original plant under heat waves compared to the edited plant. How much loss can we save on the yield? And from that, of course, there's the adaptation of results to different tomatoes used in different markets. And we have to do that part of the work and then compare the results again for, let's say, a specific local tomato. And on that, we can continue to see how this impact the production for farmers locally, from the number of farmers, their yields, and how many of them are impacted by heat waves, to calculate the save on the lost yield. And from there, we could then measure the impacts on their annual income and on their livelihoods. So this is the current way of measuring the impact.
Excellent. So important to have clear metrics for understanding the progress that is being made. Can I, on the cassava side, are you doing any work, Huoma, on looking at how it's actually affecting the nutritional status of people? Are you actually able to do that if you're changing the nutritional qualities of the crop?
Okay, so right now at the moment we are still at the preliminary stages in the research because first and foremost you need to identify a gene to target. So that's the beginning. So I think that's the level where we are now. How can we improve particularly the protein content? So looking at the different pathways for the production of protein, which particular gene can we target in order to improve it? So it is actually at the preliminary stages at this point in time.
But presumably that's something that you're going to want to be tracking as you go through this probably quite lengthy process of enhancing the crop. So, and just finally for you, Inez, we've talked about multiple benefits of gene editing. From your perspective as a lead expert in this field, do you see any disadvantages to gene editing?
I think the main challenge now, what I found in the last 1 year is at certain technologies we need access on it. And we're working now and with the private entities, and there's also a university who's going to develop an open access technology. And there are private sectors open, but this capacity to negotiate is so it's really very important that we have like a group of to work together. First, like for us it's accelerating like negotiation and also access on the infrastructure. So availability of hubs, it's also important. Availability of infrastructure in the region, I think it's also quite important. And another thing that regulation is really, we are hoping to have more and more balanced regulation, which is, if you look at the map before, it was mainly a red, but now it's more and more green, that many countries accept it as just a traditional, similar with the traditional breeding products, but it's not really parallel now. In some countries, if it's transgene free, in some countries, if it's SDN1, and it is a bit difficult for trading. And in some countries, it's SDN1 and SDN2 for those not familiar, basically, if it's not gene knockout or replacement. And this harmonization would be also important. And again, for access, which is the seed. But at the end, if it is going to be considered as the breeding products, it would follow the process for the breeding products. But this harmonization of regulation among countries would be also crucial. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks. We'll come back to that in the next panel. So thank you very much for these really fantastic insights that you have provided. And if you'll give a big round of applause to the panel. Thank you. Thank you very much. Wow, we've been having someone do amazing things and bring some of this together for us. I love this. This is very good. Thanks very much. We need access, concerns, benefits on the side of the agriculture, different crops. Very bright and colourful. So I look forward to seeing how that evolves into the next session. So let's, if I could ask the other panelists, the second panel, to come up on the stage. We also have one online. So that is Morven McLean, who'll be coming online, who's Director of Global Strategy, Regulatory and Public Affairs at the Bill and Melinda Gates Agricultural Innovations. I'd also like to ask Andrea Polo, who is Secretary General of the World Farmers Organization, right here in Rome, and Mr. Robin May, who is the Chief Scientific Advisor of the Food Standard Agency in the UK. Please join me in giving them a round of a welcome applause. So we're going to build on what's come before us now to focus a bit more on the access, regulation, response to farmers' issues. I think one of the messages that came over to me from that first panel is that you need to have the science, but you need to have everything that wraps around that to make sure that that gene editing is taken forward in an appropriate and accessible way. But I'd like to build on that to ask you, Morven. Can I just check that Morven is here?
Hello, Karina. Yes, good morning.
Excellent. Welcome. Could I ask you about the regulatory aspect as well as the access aspect? How can regulations be structured to ensure that gene-edited products are accessible to small-scale producers without compromising the incentives for innovation? Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to FAO and the Office of Innovation for the kind invitation to join you this morning, and I'm very sorry that I'm not actually able to be there in person. As we heard from the Director General yesterday, we too want to ensure that innovations are available and affordable. In fact, Bill and Melinda Gates Agricultural Innovations was set up to accelerate the translation of innovations into the hands of smallholder farmers. Before speaking directly to the topic of gene editing, I think it can be helpful to take a step back and ask ourselves, what is it we hope to accomplish with regulations? In part, we want to ensure that regulations are designed and implemented to accomplish societal goals, which are often articulated in policy. For example, social, economic, trade, or environmental objectives that will provide societal benefits. If we want regulations to serve as incentives for innovation, then it's essential that they are clear in what they seek to accomplish, are achievable, transparent, non-discriminatory, and consistent in their application. They also need to remain relevant, especially when we're talking about their application to rapidly advancing fields of technology. Regulations should not be one and done. They need to be revised or removed before they become fossilized. Looking more specifically at gene editing and its applications in crop agriculture, let's consider the end product. A new variety that's been edited to achieve an improvement, such as resistance to cassava bacterial blight that Yehoma mentioned in her intervention. Editing provides a means of introducing targeted changes into the plant genome that in many cases could similarly be introduced through other conventional plant breeding methods, including accelerated mutagenesis, but with the conventional breeding approaches taking more time to be able to realize that desired end product. And this is why many governments have taken the position, as we heard about in the previous panel, that plant products arising from some specific gene editing approaches, often referred to as site-directed nuclease or SDN1 and SDN2 plants that Inez mentioned, should be considered in the same way as conventional varieties in terms of what regulations will actually apply. So knowing that specific categories of gene-edited plants will be treated as conventional is a key driver for catalyzing use of these technologies in low and middle income countries. And conversely, ambiguity about whether gene-edited plants will or will not be regulated in the same way as transgenic plants can be a significant deterrent to accessibility and investment in this space. So this approach that regulation should be risk proportionate and fit for purpose is an important incentive for research and development actors in both the public and the private sectors. It provides clarity about what a path to market for a new gene-edited product will look like. It's really difficult to plan for success when you can't see what might be required in terms of human or institutional or financial resources. As we heard from the first panel, gene editing is already providing exciting opportunities to help meet small-scale producer priorities, open up new markets, and help address biotic and abiotic challenges associated with the impacts of climate change on agricultural productivity. However, and this is the case for all crop improvement efforts, realizing the benefits of gene editing in plant agriculture also requires robust plant breeding programs that prioritize inclusive development of product profiles, strong early generation seed production and seed systems, knowledge transfer through extension programs, and cooperation and collaboration across the public and private sectors. As Vincent said in his opening remarks, gene editing is one tool among many, and all of these other contributions are required if we're going to actually achieve the progress that we believe we can achieve by applying gene editing in agriculture. By harmonizing regulations, we can ensure that gene-edited products remain accessible to small-scale producers. And importantly, this doesn't compromise the incentives for innovation. It's about striking that right balance to foster both accessibility and continued advancements in the field. Thank you very much, Karina.
Thank you very much, Morgan. So you're making the case there for balance in order to incentivize innovation and make sure there is access and ensuring that they are risk proportionate. So if I can come to you, Andrea, you work for the Secretary General of the World Farmers Organization, which brings together national farmers organizations and agricultural cooperatives from all over the world. In your experience, how are farmers responding to emerging technologies on gene editing? And what are the opportunities and challenges that they see?
Thank you very much for your question. It's definitely the heart of the conversation, no? If farmer will accept or not technology. And in our experience, and let me give a few, in a nutshell, what is WFO, is 80 plus national farm organization for more than 55 countries that convene together. We were here last year, this year in June at the General Assembly in the very same room that I'm sitting now, so I'm very proud to be back again here. But I'm an agronomist myself, and I worked on the ground for several years. Someone around this room with a bit more of gray hair or less hair, like me, might remember golden rice, version 1, might remember Nerica, the new rice for Africa, and the penetration on the ground, very different. What was the difference there? PVS, participatory varietal selection. So listen to the farmer's need. That's, I think, is the address in the heart of your question. Is beyond the fact that there is no silver bullet in technology, we need to avoid first the pro and cons approach. Because if you get the expert around the table and the non-expert, you will always have a polarizing situation, no matter if it's cheese or transgenic, no matter if it's new genomic technique or market-assisted selection, that was something that I was growing up as a young scientist before, a life ago, something like that. While these two positions, these two polarized positions seems opposing, in reality are stemming out from the same issue, that farmers are seldomly consulted on what is their need and how the inclusion of technology can work per se. So let's reflect on who the farmers are. So farmers are not only producers of food today, and more request is on them as steward of biodiversity and natural resources. That is adding a lot of pressure on their, let's say, plate, with very tight margin. Innovation can be a key to unlock this, or let's say, to move from this stalemate, but they also, being part of their community, being economic actor, they cannot be the only one bearing cost of transformation, and they should be involved in co-design the innovation part. Since the beginning of agriculture, and I don't want to go, it's a Bible approach of 10,000 years ago, but we are talking about knowledge and traditional knowledge, and we're talking farmers of being the first geneticists doing selection without assisted techniques on bringing on the most valuable traits. So farmers might have a say on what is really needed for them or not, and they should have a say, because are the one that they will implement. And they are innovators, I say, by definition, especially young farmers that also in these days we have seen participating a lot. But what innovation is for them? First and foremost, a bottom-up approach innovation, where we start from their experience and needs with the farmers, we involve in development process, we also involve in policy process, which WFO always put an eye on. And as I said, that doesn't want to mean that farmers should lead all the process, but they should be included as respectable and knowledgeable member of a community that speaks about introducing an innovation. Last but not least, I want to go back to your initial question. So how farmers respond to emerging technologies, depending on how and how much they are being considered and involved in their development. So what are the opportunities and challenges that I see there? Well, there is a big debate, and farmers can have a say on what new genomic technique, gene editing tools means for them, to avoid what we have seen on the media, someone that have, again, some old memories of a Frankenstein food. That's all speak of lack of consensus base, lack of inclusion on the debate. There will always be polarizing, but is consensus, is multilateralism, two things that are very dear to WFO, the way on that. The success will depend a lot on the socioeconomic and political context. The question is who is really benefit from technology. If this technology is equitable, in a sharing approach. If includes farmers' knowledge and need, and it is incorporated in a participatory manner, and also if technology will not create dependencies. In several countries where our members are and where I worked, there is still lacking a certified seed system that prevent farmers to access quality seed and or disease-free seeds. So innovation is important, but they should move at the same pace and guaranteeing equal access to technology everywhere, because if we are thinking through a lens of where access to technology is open to everyone, we are preventing several countries, millions of farmers, to make the most out of the opportunity today. So welcome innovation, if it's farmer-centered, if it's solution-oriented, if it's science-based, but if it's equitable access to everyone and not a silver bullet solution presented. Thank you.
Thanks very much for sharing those extremely important perspectives here. With the word if coming up a lot, that much potential as long as those ifs are satisfied, and talking about some of the risks of creating dependencies as well as other potential opportunities. So thanks very much. Robin, I wanted to come back to the regulatory point, but I can't resist, if you don't mind. If you wouldn't mind just starting with your reaction to what Mr. Porro has told us, has shared with us, and then I'll ask you your question. Sorry to put you on the spot. I'll give you an extra couple of minutes.
Hello. Extra time is always welcome. No, that's no problem at all. It's been a fantastic session so far, and I think those comments in particular, two things really resonate with me. I think your memory back to Frankenstein Foods is a really important salient lesson. If you do not engage people in this discussion from the start, then nothing will happen right, and actually a lot of bad stuff happens. So I think a really key point for me is that engagement, that education piece, that kind of correspondence piece. And then your second point, I think, was really key too, on integrating farmers into this question. And actually by farmers, I think we mean all scales, right? We mean very large scale multinational companies, and we mean very small holding individual people with a tiny plot of land across the world, because this technology has enormous potential to help everyone, and it is absolutely critical that it is equitable and accessible for everyone right from the start. So I think those are the two things that really rang home to me.
Thanks, good to have your immediate reflections. Now you work at the UK Food Standards Agency. What are the key considerations for food safety competent authorities, including those in low and middle income countries, when developing regulatory criteria for products derived from gene editing? Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Karina. So I'm, as you said, at the Food Standards Agency. We're the government department in the UK that regulates all novel foods, and that includes genetically modified and genome edited foods. And so like many of the speakers you've heard this morning, we've been thinking about the most appropriate way to regulate these. And what I want to share, I guess, this morning is our very recent steps towards a new process for regulating genome-edited foods, which we hope might also be useful to people right across the world, and particularly perhaps in countries which don't have as long a history of regulation of this sector. And the approach we've taken is one actually which Morwen pointed out earlier, which is that there is a great diversity in genome editing between things which are radically new and things which are actually very, very familiar. And so the approach we've taken, which has just been signed into law and will come into action next, nearer, there we go, next year, is a two-tier process. And that two-tier process essentially asks what the product is you've created. If the product is something which is very, very similar to something which already exists. So for example, you've engineered a variant in a crop that already exists elsewhere. You have not fundamentally changed the food itself. All we require of the producer is a set of data about the product they've produced and a self-declaration that it's going onto the market. It's a very streamlined and efficient process for those very minorly modified crops. And we really hope that will help open the door to innovation in this sector. In contrast, if you're using genome editing for a much more radical change, for example, to introduce a new vitamin or to change the nutritional content of the food you're eating, then you are required to provide a much more detailed risk assessment, which will be considered in due course. And by making that separation, what we really hope we're doing is opening up the field to a much more rapid regulatory process. And I think there are three things in particular that we are really rooting that on. The first, and I think most important principle, as you've heard this morning, is this technology, no matter how good it is, will only ever be adopted if people understand what it's about and they are confident that it is safe. So that safety and that trust issue is really, really, for us, at the heart of everything we do. The second point, I think, is that everything we do in the FSA, and I think everything that FAO wants to do, is a very science-led question. So we are very, very clear that what we are assessing here is scientific evidence, not gut feelings, not passion, not hearsay. It's about the evidence you provide for the quality of the product you're producing. And the final point I think that we've taken is one of transparency. So all of the science and evidence that goes into our assessment is transparently published. Our decisions are transparently published. And all of the guidelines that apply to the people who would apply to us are also published online. And that, I hope, is something that might be useful to other countries. Essentially, this process from start to finish is completely visible and available on the web. And what I'm really hoping it will do is firstly be useful to other regulators in devising their own system, but also in stimulating an international conversation. We really want to hear from people about the way we approach this and the science that underpins it. And as we all know in this room, science is an incredibly international endeavor. It doesn't recognize borders. It recognizes the quality of the evidence it's provided. And so what we're really hoping to do is have a much more open international debate and a conversation going forward that will hopefully open up innovation in this sector. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Robin, and making a second call there for making sure that we're including all of the necessary voices in this conversation. So thank you for that, and making some key points about trust, and transparency, which is clearly very important. Now we have 10 minutes, if we have 10 minutes or so, for any questions that you might have from the floor, and just checking if there's anything from Zoom. I do want to just make it clear for those who are online that you are able to ask questions, and please put them on, and we can answer if there's time for it. So can I see if there's any particular questions in the room? Yes, could I go to you first and then over to you? Please give your name and an organisation. As I said, if you could ask a specific question. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Ira, and thank to all the panelists as well for a very interesting talk. My name is Laura Garcia Calvo, and I work as a researcher in Nofima, which is a food research institute in Norway. And my question has to do about trust and transparency. I think it's a very interesting topic, and for us researchers working on the topic of especially cellular agriculture, so perhaps the next stage, I could say, I want to know what are your opinions on how to involve the public opinion and how to make it maybe more accessible and more trustworthy. So basically tips for us researchers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A question on trust there. Please, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paola Laini. I'm a young farm worker based in northern Italy, and I'm a member of the Italian Rural Association, which in Italy is a member of La Via Campesina. I would like to ask a specific question on the impact on the patentability of these new products on farmers, especially small-scale farmers. If in this process of regulating the impact of these patents has been evaluated, including the economic impact. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Two very specific questions there. I'll come back to you. There was a question there about building trust. If I could ask Robin for you to address that first.
Yeah, thanks. So in terms of building trust, absolutely, that is incredible. Incredibly important, and we can't do too much. So I guess there are two things I would say. The first is that everyone has their part to play here, and I think the more we go out and engage, about what your science is, what you're doing, and how it might apply, the better. And in particular, I think doing that with communities who you feel maybe unwelcoming is actually even more important. So don't go and talk to other scientists about your science. I mean, do that too, but go and talk to people who are perhaps opposed to this. And I would say on that, I think it's really important for those of us who are in this sector, in this room, to realise that for most people, this is a complete black box. People really don't know. And for example, in the UK, we've done quite a lot of work about traditional farming, and it's something like 1 in 4 school children has never seen a cow. So if you haven't seen a cow, it is extremely difficult to then understand what a genome-edited products might look like. So I think really having that conversation about where food comes from, why it's important and what it does, and being very, very open about the fact that there are, as with any technology, some risks, and we are setting up systems to minimize those risks, but not brushing those under the carpet. It's really important we have an active and honest discussion, I think, from the day one.
Thanks very much. And then over to you, a question from another farmers' organisation, La Via Campesina, specific to the issue of patents. And Morven, I can come to you next on this one. Over to you.
Well, thank you. And I don't think that is only me, it's also policy component on the question that was mentioned. But I think that two traits are together. I mean, one is the participatory approach to research, starting from the National Farm Organization and the farmers to define objectives that are agreeable to farmers. And on the part that I mentioned, yeah, I agree. I mean, it's important will be to not look to create dependencies. But that will be the fate for every technology. It's interesting to see also in classic approach on certified seed or say seed community approach and seed system. In any case, several farmers around the world that will be more keen to, especially the one that I work at as well, to have certified seed. And the concept of a premium price is related to the quality they are placing. And then maybe also being able to multiply them, but having the option to choose if I want to externalize the risk of bringing disease, or, like I've seen in several countries in the Global South, planting seeds that I purchased on the market because I sold every last bit of my production and I was unable to save the seed because I'm an alternate condition. When it comes to create the dependency, obviously policy have an important role to play. The World Farm Organization always advocate for an approach that is inclusive and respectful of farmers' needs. But yeah, like every innovation in agriculture might have a segmented entrance where someone is, and since we are in this house, I think that there will be no better way to say someone is left behind. And that's not what we want, neither WFO want to advocate for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Before coming to you, Morven, can I just see if there's any other questions in the room? I'll take another couple of questions and then come back to you, Morven. If I could come to you first and then to the gentleman behind you.
Yes, hello. Working for Deloitte, former EFSA employee, and working also with the FDA on food safety matters. I just wanted to follow up on her questions. Scientific divergence sometimes happens, we know it's part of the process, but it's clearly a huge detractor in building trust. How does the scientific community deal with that?
So a question about scientific divergence there, and please... over to you.
Yeah, my question is for Andrea. So I work for the Global Forum on Agricultural Research. You mentioned rightly NERICA, New Rice for Africa. I happened to work 3 years with the father of NERICA, Dr. Monty Jones. He passed away 5 months ago, and he left his family in rather poor conditions, financially wise. Now, NERICA, back in 1993, was seen as the miracle crossbreeding of Asian rice and Western Africa rice, having a high yield and resistance against the local West African diseases. In the meantime, African rice has produced something like 115 strains of NERICA rice, new rice for Africa. I think you said very rightly there was no collaboration since 30 years ago with the farmers, and the uptake of NERICA was quite poor all over Africa, despite the development of different strains of NERICA rice. The issue was taste, taste, and taste. Farmers do not per se like the new NERICA rice. What is your take on taste?
Thanks very much for those questions. I am going to go to Morven first. Morven, there was a question there about policy and patents. There was also a question about science divergence, about how how that's managed. So please share with us your reflections on the questions that have been asked.
Thank you very much, Karina. I mean, I think Ines actually mentioned it in the earlier panel. She touched on the point of patentability. And I think a lot of the focus at this point in time has been placed on the complex patent landscape that exists in the gene editing space. And it's very important that as we move forward and we're applying gene editing, that we are considering that in the front end of when we're building out the work that we're doing to ensure that there actually is that reach through to commercialization. And again, you know, reflecting on Inez's comments about being able to engage and ensure that we actually do have that freedom to operate in going forward. I think there has been less discussion on whether or not or how patentability may apply to end products coming out of gene editing. And again, reflecting on the fact that most of the focus so far is on these simple mutations, which are analogous to mutations that you can get through conventional breeding, and whether or not that would even be patentable, I think is a very interesting question that deserves a lot of attention.
Thanks very much, Morven. We're coming to an end of this panel now, but Robin, if I could ask you to speak to this point about divergence in the science, which is it's part of science. That's a natural part of the scientific process. And then move to you, Andrea. Perhaps if you could also pick up on this point around how does that look to farmers when the science differs, but also in response to this point about whether the lack of adoption is through to the lack of considerations of taste and integration of farmers. But Robin, if we could start with you.
Yeah, absolutely, thanks. So I think I'd make 2 points here. The first is that science divergence is part of the scientific method, right? We disagree. It usually eventually reaches consensus. So I think we have to be very transparent about the fact that there are some issues which may not be clear at a particular point, but science as a whole is working towards the truth, and be very transparent about that. I would make a very strong distinction between that and what we call risk management divergence, where actually an identical piece of science, for very good reason, may lead to different policies in different countries or different regions. And that's all about, you know, cultural acceptability, social norms, and that is perfectly right. It's completely correct. What I wouldn't want to do is conflate the two. You know, there is a scientific truth out there, and ultimately we'll get to that. There are then decisions you make based on that, and that is something that is not a scientific process, that's a policy process.
Thanks very much. Very important distinction. Please, Andrea.
We'll try to summarize.
Yeah, I think it's okay.
We'll try to... Wow, sorry. We'll try to summarize a bit. I think that it stays again on the approach of involving farmers. I mean, the participatory varietarial selection that was the initial claim on the NERICA approach, then you lose some bits along the way. I mean, it's not a one-time trial. The participatory varietarial selection is also related to consumer, I mean, to taste, to farmer interest, to local and traditional knowledge. So that's where it sits, the involvement of farmers. It's not tokenism. It's a constant engagement that always redefine and check with them what are their needs. And that spokes also on the divergency component. I mean, science answer to questions. So, and is not producing dogmatic truth, but to quote one of my old professors, he is replacing a wrong answer with a one less wrong answer to a problem. So today we need data, we need more data, we need more information, and also that one will come from farmer, but it opens up a new debate that is, thank God, is not for today, on well, the data fate and all this information that we are getting, or we are asking farmer to collect and share. What's the fate, and so the democracy on data and the role in farmers on that, which speaks to the information that we will need to look the impact of any innovation entries in agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'd like you to give a good round of applause to these excellent panelists. Thank you. And if you'd like to take your seats. Thank you. Now we're now going to move to another Mentimeter to get a sense of, wow, another amazing version of the diagram here. But if we could move to the Mentimeter to see how things are which actions should FAO focus on for gene editing at the country and regional or global levels? And there's some options here, and those options should have been informed by the discussions on the stage. Enable research and innovation in gene editing, support capacity strengthening and technical training, provide evidence base for developing regulatory frameworks, facilitate international cooperation and knowledge sharing. What action should FAO focus on? This will be really helpful for us as an institution moving forward to understand how to focus our work. So we've got a few more on the facilitating international cooperation and providing an evidence base. Bit less on the research. Maybe that's more the responsibilities of the research institutions out there. So now we've got more on the international cooperation, knowledge sharing, and providing the evidence base. Thank you. Thank you very much. That gives us good data to be moving forward with, at least an initial insight to be moving forward with. You can just take it off. Okay, so we've learned a lot there. I have to admit my overarching reflection is really the incredible depth of both knowledge, expertise, and experience, but also the depth of reflection that our panelists have given this area of work. Really very, very impressive. I was incredibly fascinated by all of the points that were made that clearly reflected in-depth engagement and experience of this topic. So on the science, we learned a lot about the science and the potential benefits of gene editing, from health to climate resistance to disease resistance, food security, etc. But we also learned that that's about the old and the new. It's not just, it's about actually going back and looking at the old cultivars, the orphan crops, as well as moving forward in entirely new ways. Second, on the innovation, we heard about innovation in all of its forms. Innovation certainly in terms of scientific innovation, but also business innovation in startups, in innovation in policy and regulations, which are needed in order to accompany innovations in the science, and also innovations in the way that farmers need to be engaged. On the farmers' side, we heard, importantly, about how the co-creation of knowledge and inclusion and co-production on really understanding what farmers need from gene editing will be vital. And it's not only vital because it's better for farmers, but without that, we won't actually have the adoption of these crops. So the science will go to waste. So that's clearly incredibly important. And finally, there's no silver bullet. The science needs to be accompanied by a whole host of other actions, from building trust, from the regulatory environment. We heard a lot about the need to involve multiple stakeholders, the need to consider access. So we need a portfolio of actions around the science in order to make sure that the investment in this science reaps the potential rewards. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much to our panelists. Please give them another round of applause. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.